Welcome to BIB Daily, the podcast from the newsroom of business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk Lapointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. This week, our podcast is examining the changing nature of work, its dynamics and challenges in the pandemic era, and how employers and employees are adapting to this new normal. Our series is brought to you by the professional services firm Deloitte, by the workers' compensation organization WorkSafe BC, and by the law firm Harris & Company. We've looked this week at how businesses can prepare their workplaces properly to return, at how we maintain the trust relationship there and enhance resilience in that organization, and in the legal requirements of employers in this period. Today, we want to take a look at the evolving workplace culture, how we encourage the best dynamic in the workplace as we open businesses. And for this, we've turned to a regular contributor to our podcast, Rocky Ozaki, who's the founder of NowOfWork. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Kirk, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see people again, isn't it? I mean, isn't that just the way? It's getting together with people that's the problem, Rocky. I mean, so we've got a permanent situation, it appears, of remote work. Mm-hmm. And so what are you counseling businesses to think about as they lurch into this at times?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you kicked it off properly, is that this is probably going to be, in most people's estimations, at least another 12 to 18 months. I think most of our clients and people I talk to are sort of using this vaccine availability, broadly available, as their horizon. Mm-hmm. So if you believe that to be true, this is going to be the next normal for at least another year or so. And so, what we're having to coach companies through is that number one, I guess, is the honeymoon's kind of over. Right. So many stories are like, actually, we were more productive than we thought we were going to be. And oh my gosh, it didn't take a year to go remote. It only took us a week to get our IT set up. And so there's all these successes, but the honeymoon is ending. And so now companies are starting to say, how do we maintain that social component that we actually need more than we thought? How are we maintaining collaboration, innovation, and productivity through that? And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing now.
I suppose the central question is, can you do that in a video-only type of engagement?
I'm not convinced. I think that fundamental to people is this social aspect where we need to be around people. There's serendipitous collisions that happen, particularly in modern companies who are big on innovation. In this rapidly changing world, by the way, we all need to be innovative. And so you lose a little bit of that, the unexpected, those pass-by conversations that normally would happen in person. So are there stopgaps and solutions? Absolutely. But do I think that this is going to be the way we work forever away from each other? I don't think so.
So how do you make the best of it?
Yeah. So one thing for sure is you got to embrace it, right? Like, this is our reality. And so if Zoom is your thing or whatever video app you're using, there are all these little tricks. Like I found actually, Kirk, some simple things like playing music before a meeting on Zoom actually sets the tone right away, ensuring that you're getting constant feedback and you're making
playing music.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. It's like that your first impression. All these Zoom calls that we join, what normally happens? We all sit there, there's that awkward silence, you're kind of waiting around, who's going to start, and what do I do? Do I turn my video on or off? But what happened if you did a simple thing like played some music in the background? What if you had a couple of poll questions? And so these are really tactical, but I think they're real. I think that if you want to survive, you've got to start thinking about the human experience in the virtual world, which starts with that first impression.
But I don't want to have that bad music that I have gotten old.
No, your culture.
Okay. So better kind of music, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and know the intent of the meeting. If it's an upbeat innovation session, get something upbeat. So I don't want to get too tactical, but that's something that has struck me as actually being quite powerful, as well as I was mentioning, taking regular breaks, getting feedback regularly. And so when you start to use Zoom with other tools, like there's, I don't want to promote any particular company, but there's a lot of great collaboration tools online. Mm-hmm. And so instead of just saying, Kirk, what's your opinion? What if you started to draw from some of these collaboration tools where people are actually engaging? So maybe it's on a sticky note, but it's a card that they're putting online and they're seeing what other people are doing. You're moving cards around and innovating. And so I think leveraging technology and some of the great apps out there help to facilitate that social component we're missing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously meetings in person, you basically take a look at the body language of people in a room. Mm-hmm. You can almost get a sense of the energy level in a real hurry. You You can sense if something is going over well as an idea, not going over well as an idea. What are you what are you helping clients understand about how that translates into this two-dimensional, visual only type of relationship?
Yeah. So again, tactically, a gallery view is super important if you're using any app. So you just want to say, listen, these are rules of engagement. If we're on a meeting, then let's all see each other because body language does matter. And so on that point, I don't. It works for me anyway, Kirk. But I will often do in my meetings simple things like every 5 minutes we're on topic. Hey, can we just get a thumbs up if you guys are on track? Thumbs up, or has this been terrible? Give me a thumb check. And then if I see a bunch of these, then what does that tell me? Then
Yeah.
maybe I need to stop and reiterate. But if I get a bunch of thumbs up, then I say, okay, I can move on. And so absolutely, this two-dimensional thing, you're going to have to acknowledge it. Like I said, it all comes down to just embracing and acknowledging the elephant in the room. There are ways to make them effective, but you've got to change some of your habits, in this virtual world.
And no differently than when you have a meeting of some sort in person, when people aren't talking, it's incumbent on whoever is chairing or even those participating to ask each other to weigh in, right?
Yes, and this is also why I love breakouts. Instead of having one-way dialogue, break them out. Have a talk about it in your smaller groups, and then come back with your questions that you all align to. And then we hear a lot about the introvert, which I kind of dispel a lot of what they suggest. But if they're not going to speak up, should we be proactively saying, "Hey, Rocky, what do you think?" Knowing that I'm not the one who's normally going to speak up, I'm okay with that. But I really think the breakouts, taking big groups, breaking them into smaller groups, having them sort of debate and opine with their opinions, then coming back to the broader meeting is helpful. And by the way, when I think of meetings, Kirk, I hope anyone listening here has realized that all of their meetings were probably double or 2/3 too long as they should have been when they were in person.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that. On the other hand, Rocky, when I'm connecting with people on Zoom, I feel like I've got to spend the first 15 minutes just catching up on their lives because I'm not seeing them in person.
Right.
So I'm stuck on this one. It really is becoming a bit of a mess. Now, when it comes to the actual integration of this technology into then the decision making of a company, because again, many decisions are made by the boss in a corner office kind of thing. In some cases, they're made by a team, on the floor. What's emerging as decent decision-making protocol now in this new era, so that it doesn't become punted over to the boss? It doesn't get over to a team that doesn't then talk to other people. How are we making this work?
So that's a really interesting question too, because I feel that most meetings were dysfunctional previously. We went into meetings, every meeting was structured the same way, that was brainstorming or decision making or sharing, whatever it was. And so what I'm finding, Kirk, is that at least the success I've seen with our clients is that we push them on pre-work. So this is one of the failures that most organizations didn't do. You went into a meeting without doing proper pre-work. And so we said it was incumbent upon all of you, because this was going to be on video, and this 4-hour meeting, this decision making we're going to usually do, we're going to make it an hour for starters. But if you don't do the pre-work, you won't be ready. So in some ways, I think it's a real gift, so that you're actually coming prepared. So we applied this. We've been doing a lot of COVID strategic planning for organizations, and the longest we've gone in authoring multiple scenarios for their business in this next 6 to 12 months has been 4 hours.
Wow.
And so, but that's only because we did pre-work. We did a bunch of things that you need to read this, you need to opine it here, you need to vote on this. And so when we get together, it's actually about what are all the things we agree to? Done. Now, what are the things that we need to still debate? And wow, do those meetings shrink fast?
So one of the things that you can often like about any meeting is that it's a bit of a safe place to have these discussions, right? And there's no, as they say, no dumb idea kind of thing. But obviously these technologies provide us the opportunity to record. What's your sense of whether we ought to be recording it? Because look, on the other hand, at least you have a record of what was done. You don't have any dispute over what was said. But should we be recording these?
I don't know. So when my experience, I'm laughing because I've actually tested this with a client, and when we didn't record, it was pretty free flowing. Now, granted, this organization had a really leadership team that could easily debate, right, and dissent. The minute we said we're recording, for no other reason that, hey, note taken, we had a note taker, how about we just record it? It was so evident, Kirk, that people did not opine as they would before.
Sure.
So I don't have a solution for it, but you're bang on that is something that it's anything else. It's like social media. The minute you put it out there, it's out there for everyone to see. And so I don't have an answer for that, Kirk, but it's absolutely something that that I'm seeing, really be an impediment for some organizations.
It's no different than when, we've tried at times over the years to record our news decision making meetings. People clam up, or they say the most perfected things, and they don't really speak their minds. Yeah. So that gives rise to the issue of, do people speak their minds in the same way in video, in this kind of setting, or are you noticing anything yet where there is a little bit more reticence, reflection, a little less freewheeling nature of it?
Yeah, I have no science to back this, but I'm really opposed to putting like generational differences. I think we're all just people. The world has changed for people in different generations, but I am seeing that. I do find that there's a certain threshold or certain age and under who are more willing to be vulnerable, be in person. But guess what? They have been doing FaceTiming for 5 years or however long the asked. They've been on video with their friends all through growing up and going through school in their early careers. And so it's a little more natural of a way of communicating. For a different generation, or forget about generation again, for people who have not used video conferencing before, or any kind of, in a social context, this is new. And so I don't see as any different than any other technology that's come out, is that there's going to be a period in which people are going to be cautious. And what I'm hoping is that this becomes the next normal, that you're more comfortable in being yourself again. But there's no question there are certain demographics that are still having to get socialized with this idea of being vulnerable on video.
Are we ever going to go back to the phone call?
Oh, I think so.
Really? Just that phone call?
Oh, well,
an audio phone call? Yeah.
So this is I don't want to go off too much of a tangent, right? But this is my fear, is that the paradigm of work was broken. I've been preaching about this forever, right? Mm-hmm. And now there's just been a sort of unfreezing of organizations who realize that, yes, the old industrial way of work doesn't work, and we need to change. So from some sort of like behavioral science perspective, habit discontinuity says when your life's been turned upside down, you're more likely to change your habits. Organizations have done that. But what's going to happen when the vaccine comes? So this is my fear. In your personal life, when a crisis happens, whatever it is, you change your habits because your father dies of cancer and of lung cancer, and you stop smoking for a month. But then what happens? You go back to your old behavior. It's like this human nature thing. So when I say probably, Kirk, it's not that I think that the phone has utility. I don't have extreme confidence that humans generally aren't going to go back to comfort and the old ways once this pandemic has passed. Like, how much pain do we have to go through to change forever? And that's still unknown. But the companies that don't will lose for sure. That's what I would say. But there are going to be many who fall back to the phone and the old way of working and the pace that they used to do and all these other old ways of working. I'm convinced many are going to go back to that.
Can we just get rid of the fax machine if nothing else?
I hope so.
Yeah, I think we still have a few of them around.
Oh my gosh.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I've heard so many say also, why didn't we think of doing this before? Right?
The pain wasn't big enough. They were successful despite. And in a lot of cases, so I'm going to pick on the enterprise. And so they had a big balance sheet. They were successful. There was not enough pain. These startups were just sort of a nuisance. And this startup and scale up world is how all companies are going to be operating. And it's proven all through this pandemic. The pace of technology adoption, the way you're embracing your customers and customer and human centricity. This is stuff that's not new to modern and technology companies, not just tech, by the way, but modern companies. These enterprises didn't have to worry about it. And so it didn't matter what we preached about exponential technologies or changing demographics or sharing economy, they were fine. Well, guess what it took? A pandemic. And that's the pain. When it hit the balance sheet, when it hits the shareholders, when it hits, all these other key indicators and their scorecard items, Kirk, Now they had to listen.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so there just wasn't enough pain before.
Yeah. So now we're in this phase, and I think you called it correctly. It's the post-honeymoon phase around all of this. And a lot of places are beginning to bring people back to some degree. And, and I think there's some experiences that are actually being beneficial in all of this. People are, of course, reclaiming a little bit of that old dynamic that they had in the office, that old, place in the workplace that people really so cherish in a lot of ways. How are you counseling companies to approach this period to not be too dramatic, not be too bold, not to unwind too much of what's going on? Because of course we're still in the midst of all of this. What's your counsel about how much is enough to bring people back in at times?
So I would say number one, do not copy anyone else. You have to know your business. You have to know the threshold of risk that your team members have. I think you got to get really personal and really human with your team members, and they've got to be part of the solution. And so instead of going out there and saying, here is our plan, what do you think? And who's in, how about just allowing your team members to help to co-author that? What are your thresholds? What might work for you? I think that you've got to lead with a really human approach to this, and then give them the confidence through great communication, great transparency. And next to humanization, by the way, is that safety component. It seems so obvious, but have you factored the elevator? Have you factored one-way traffic in your office? Have you factored how often you're cleaning? Have you factored rules? There was this really interesting, I'm sure you've seen it. Someone came up with the wristbands. Did you see this? The red, yellow, and green? Like, that's a great indicator. It's like, it gives team members confidence to know that they all have a shared language. If I've got a red wristband on, that means please respect my distance. I'm still cautious. Keep your 6 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just people. It averts people having to wear masks as a bit of a sign to people that they want a little bit of their space.
Or be afraid to say that I'm a little bit more cautious than others, right? Like, I have that problem in my social sphere. So anyway, when you get back to the work, what I'm suggesting is that take a human approach, lead with transparency and communication, co-author it. And of course, the safety piece has to be number one over anything else.
Yeah. I'm asking people at times as we talk to them daily here on a podcast about what surprised them the most. And so let's conclude with that. What has surprised you the most, Rocky, in this period?
Part of me wants to say I'm surprised how fast everyone moved, but I'm not, because I've seen it happen in modern companies. I guess I'm surprised, actually, and I'm going to take a really Vancouver and BC lens. I'm surprised how resilient that we've been, and how, we follow the orders. I think that, we've got a great leader behind us, coaching us on what we should be doing. And she's sort of led the way. And I've been super surprised, to be honest, because the great weather we had in the spring, of how well at least people I saw abided by the directions and kept their distance, and et cetera. So I gave me a renewed sense of humanity and how we can work together as a community. I hate to say it, but I was pleasantly surprised by that.
At least in British Columbia, Rocky.
At least exactly in British Columbia. That's been my lens, right? In this area.
Sure.
So yeah, so that would be my biggest takeaway. Yeah.
Well, good seeing you. Thanks for the conversation. Good to catch up.
Oh, Kirk, great seeing you again. Thanks for having me.
Rocky Ozaki is the founder of NowOfWork, and we'll be talking to him, I think, in the weeks to come with a lot of things. You've been watching BIV Daily. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Thanks a lot for watching.